The wind that night was merciless, but what froze me wasn't the cold. It was the sight of him curled on the ground like a man life had abandoned. I had seen suffering before, but never like this. And though I had nothing to give, something in me refused to walk past him. The night was cruel. The air cut like knives against my skin, sharp and unrelenting, as if the world itself had turned hostile. The sky above was a vast blanket of darkness, only occasionally pierced by the dim glow of stars. The moon was hidden, swallowed by thick clouds, leaving our small African village drenched in shadows. My breath rose in small, trembling clouds before me, each one fading into the void, like unspoken prayers. I clutched my thin shawl tightly around my shoulders, my steps quickening against the biting wind. Nights like this were hard enough when you had 4 walls and a roof. Out here in the open, they were merciless. The road stretched ahead, quiet and lifeless, the usual noise of daytime chatter replaced by an eerie silence. Only the distant howl of dogs broke the stillness. And then, I saw him. At first he looked like nothing more than a bundle of rags thrown carelessly on the roadside. But as I drew closer, I realized it wasn't rags. It was a man. His body was curled tightly against itself, as if he was trying to disappear into the earth. His clothes were torn, barely covering his skin, and his hands trembled violently in the cold. His chest rose and fell shallowly, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he might already be gone. I froze mid-step. My instincts told me to keep walking. My own house wasn't far, and my family needed me. I didn't have the luxury to stop for strangers, especially not in the middle of the night. I had barely enough for myself. What could I possibly offer him? But something about him held me there. Maybe it was the way his face, half hidden beneath tangled hair, still carried a trace of dignity despite the dirt and bruises. Maybe it was the way his body, though weak and shivering, seemed to hold a strange stillness, as if he had once been someone important. Or maybe it was his eyes, because when they fluttered open, catching the faint glimmer of starlight, they locked onto mine with such intensity that my breath caught. Those eyes didn't look like they belonged to a beggar. They didn't plead or accuse. They carried something else, something heavier. I looked away quickly, my heart pounding. The cold gnawed at me. My fingers burned from clutching the thin shawl. But I knew the truth. I was still better off than him. At least I had a home waiting for me, parents who worried if I didn't return, a mat to lie on. He had nothing but the cruel wind and the hard ground. I stood frozen in that moment, torn between fear and compassion. I wanted to keep walking, to bury the image of him in the shadows. But another voice inside me, a quieter, stubborn voice, refused to let me. With trembling hands, I reached down and untied the old blanket I had wrapped around my waist. It wasn't much. Thin, worn at the edges, patched so many times it was more stitch than fabric, but it was all I had, the only thing keeping the cold from devouring me. My fingers hesitated as I held it above him. If I gave it away, the night would be even harsher for me. But if I didn't, I wasn't sure he would survive till morning. I took a deep breath and knelt beside him. His body stiffened at my presence, his eyes widening faintly as he registered my shadow. Without speaking, I draped the blanket over him. The change was instant. His trembling slowed, his shoulders relaxing just slightly under the weight of the cloth. For the first time, I saw him take a deep, steady breath, as if warmth had returned to his body. And then his eyes found mine again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. His gaze pierced me, deep and searching, like he was memorizing my face. Then his lips parted, and in a voice rough from silence and suffering, he whispered 2 words. "Thank you." They were ordinary words, but the way he said them, it was as if I had given him something far more than a blanket. His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with a strange weight, like gratitude born from years of being unseen. I swallowed hard. unable to answer. My chest tightened with emotions I couldn't name. Pity? Fear? Or was it something else? Something unsettling, like I had just stepped into a story I didn't yet understand. I rose to my feet quickly, brushing the dirt from my knees. My legs felt weak, my hands cold. I needed to go home before the night swallowed me too. But even as I turned to leave, I could feel his eyes following me, burning into my back. The road ahead seemed darker now, heavier somehow, as if carrying the weight of what I had just done. My steps quickened, but my heart refused to calm. And then I heard him. His voice was soft, almost carried away by the wind. But it reached me clearly. "One day," he whispered, "you'll understand why this matters more than you think." I froze mid-step, my blood running cold. I turned slightly, but the shadows swallowed his figure once again, leaving only the faint outline of a man wrapped in my blanket. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but fear and confusion held me still. So I walked away, the echo of his words haunting me with every step. As I walked away, his whisper followed me. "One day, you'll understand why this matters more than you think." I didn't know it then, but those words would unravel everything I thought I knew. About him, about my village, and about the life I had been living. He didn't thank me like others would. He thanked me like I had returned something he'd lost years ago. His voice wasn't desperate. It wasn't weak. It was calm, steady, and far too wise for a man who looked like he had nothing left. That thank you stayed with me, echoing louder than the wind itself. The blanket had barely settled on his shoulders when I turned to walk away. I thought that was the end of it. Just another night. Just another act of kindness. But before I had taken more than 3 steps, his voice reached me again. "Why?" he asked. The word was soft, almost lost in the wind, but it hit me like a stone. I turned slowly, my shawl clutched tightly around me. His eyes were open now, fixed on me with an intensity that felt strange, unsettling. "Why would you give away the only blanket you had?" he asked again, his tone not accusing, but genuinely curious. His voice was low and rough, yet beneath the cracks there was something steady, something that didn't belong to a beggar. I hesitated. "Because," I swallowed hard, my voice trembling, "because my mother taught me that when you see someone in need, you don't walk past them. Even if you have little, you share." A faint smile touched his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "And what has that lesson given you?" The question pierced deeper than I expected. I shifted uncomfortably, my hands tightening around my shawl. "What has it given me?" "Struggle. Hunger. Long nights wondering how we'll survive tomorrow. But also," I paused, searching for the right words. "It's given me strength. It's kept me human." His eyes softened, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw something flicker there. Pain, recognition, maybe even regret. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the whistling wind. Finally, I sighed and sat down on the edge of the dusty road, a few steps from him. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because his voice didn't sound like the others who begged outside the market. Maybe because I felt he wasn't asking out of need, but out of something else. I spoke before I could stop myself. "My family doesn't have much. My father breaks his back carrying crates at the market. My mother sells vegetables from sunrise till her voice is gone. Some nights we eat, some nights we don't. But through it all, she's always told me, share what you can, even if it hurts, because kindness is never wasted." He listened without interrupting, his eyes fixed on mine. And that was what unsettled me most. Beggars usually nod, murmur prayers, ask for more. But he didn't. He just listened, fully, as though every word I spoke mattered. "You speak like someone far older than you are," he said finally, his tone thoughtful. "And you give like someone who knows loss." I froze. How could he know that? My chest tightened as memories I tried to bury rose again. Nights when we went hungry, Days when my father's strength nearly gave out. Times when laughter in our home felt forced, stretched thin over silence. Yes, I whispered, my throat tight. I know loss. Too well. He nodded slowly, as though my answer confirmed something he had already suspected. For a long while we said nothing, the silence heavy, but not empty. It was then I noticed movement in the shadows. Figures, villagers, some of them familiar, watching us from a distance. Their whispers carried faintly through the wind. Who is he? Why is she talking to him? He's been sleeping on the streets for weeks. Cursed, maybe. Dangerous. She should stay away. The words burned my ears, but I pretended not to hear. Still, I could feel their eyes on me, judging, warning. He noticed, too. His lips curved slightly, not in amusement, but in sadness. They fear me, he said softly, almost to himself. They always fear what they don't understand. I frowned. Why? You're just a man with nothing. What's there to fear? His gaze lifted to the sky for a moment, as though the stars carried the answer. When he looked back at me, his eyes were darker, heavier. Sometimes it's not what you have that makes people afraid. It's what they think you carry inside you. His words sent a chill down my spine. What could a homeless man possibly carry that frightened others? I shifted, uncomfortable, my instincts urging me to leave. But before I could rise, he spoke again. You've given me something precious tonight, he said, pulling the blanket tighter around himself. Not the cloth, not the warmth, but the reminder that kindness still exists. Do you know how rare that is? His voice cracked slightly on the last words, and for the first time, I realized there were tears glistening in his eyes. I opened my mouth to reply, but my voice caught in my throat. This wasn't how beggars spoke. This wasn't how broken men thanked. There was weight in his tone, history in his silence. And then, he leaned closer, his eyes narrowing as if measuring my soul. Do you know, he whispered, who built the very village you live in? His question froze me more than the night ever could. My breath caught, my heart pounded. What kind of beggar asked such a thing? I stared at him in stunned silence as he whispered again, Do you know who built the very village you live in? And in that moment I realized, this man wasn't who he seemed. That question pulled open a wound I never wanted to reveal. His eyes demanded truth, not excuses. And for the first time, under the weight of his gaze, I felt the walls around my heart crack open. I could no longer hide what I had buried for years. I looked at him, unsure if I should answer. Who was this man to ask me such a question? Who was he to stir pain I had spent my life swallowing? But his stare was steady, patient, almost merciless in its silence. He wasn't going to let me escape. And maybe I didn't want to. My wish, I whispered, my voice trembling. I only wish for stability, for my family to live without fear that tomorrow will collapse under us. The words surprised even me. I had never said them out loud. They lived in my chest like secrets, too fragile to expose, too painful to share. But tonight, with him sitting wrapped in my blanket, listening with that strange intensity, they poured out like water from a broken vessel. I closed my eyes for a moment, and memories crashed over me. I was 10 years old when the flood came. Our old village, the place where my parents and grandparents were born, was swallowed by water in a single night. I still remember the roar of the river, the screams in the darkness, the way the ground trembled as homes were ripped from their foundations. We lost everything, our house, our fields, our savings. We carried nothing but the clothes on our backs as we stumbled into the unknown. For months we wandered. Some families gave up, others scattered. My parents refused to stop fighting. They found this new land, barren and broken, and said, "We will start again." And somehow they did. The village where I lived now wasn't born from prosperity. It was born from survival. Strangers came together with scraps of wood, broken bricks, hands blistered from labor. We rebuilt walls with borrowed nails, patched roofs with old tin, dug wells until our palms bled. And little by little, a village rose again. But though the houses stood, the wounds never healed. Debt clung to us like shadows. My father broke his back carrying crates for merchants who barely knew his name. My mother stood in the market until her voice cracked, shouting prices no one wanted to pay. Nights were long, often filled with silence around an empty table. Some nights we laughed, but it was a fragile laughter, laughter to hide hunger, not joy. And through it all, I carried my parents' burden in silence. I smiled when they smiled, even when my stomach twisted with emptiness. I pretended not to hear their whispered arguments about money, their whispered prayers for miracles. I swallowed my fear, because if I didn't, it would drown us all. I opened my eyes, and to my shock, tears blurred my vision. I quickly wiped them away, ashamed of my weakness. "I just want stability," I said again, my voice stronger this time. "I want my father to wake up without pain. I want my mother to sell her vegetables without crying at night. I want to stop fearing tomorrow." My words trembled in the cold air, heavy and raw, and still. He didn't speak. He just watched me, his eyes dark, unblinking, filled with something I couldn't name. Recognition. That was it. Recognition. It was as if he knew every pain I spoke of, as if he had walked the same road, carried the same weight. His silence wasn't empty. It was full, overflowing with understanding. The longer he looked at me, the more unsettled I felt. How could a man with nothing know so much of my heart? How could his eyes echo my suffering like it was his own? I turned away, hugging my shawl tighter, embarrassed. "Forget it," I muttered. "I shouldn't have said all that. You wouldn't understand." But his voice cut through the night, soft but steady. "I do understand," he said. I froze. Slowly I turned back to him. He was leaning forward now, his hands clutching the blanket I had given him, his eyes burning into mine with quiet fire. "I know what it means to rebuild from ashes," he continued. "I know what it means to lose everything, to carry burdens too heavy for your age, to hide pain so others can smile. I know." His voice broke slightly, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of grief in his eyes, so raw, it pierced me. "Because I built this village." My breath caught. My heart stopped. "What?" I whispered, stunned. He leaned closer, his face half hidden in the shadows, but his eyes never left mine. "I know," he whispered, "because I built it. With my own hands." His words crashed into me like thunder. My mind reeled, my chest tightened. How could a man wrapped in rags claim to have built the very village I lived in? My lips parted to speak, but no words came. And in that silence, a truth began to stir. The man before me was no ordinary beggar. The idea was absurd. How could a man in rags claim to have built my village? My mind rebelled against his words, but my heart told me there was truth buried in them. I needed answers, even if they shattered everything I thought I knew. The night pressed heavily around us. His eyes hadn't moved from mine, steady and burning with conviction. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss him as a liar spinning tales to survive another night. But the weight in his voice was undeniable, and the way he looked at me, like I was someone who deserved to know, kept me frozen in place. At last, he gestured toward the small tea stall across the road. Its flickering lantern cast a soft orange glow, the smell of ginger and charcoal rising into the cold night. "Come," he said quietly. "If you want to understand, sit with me." I hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. Finally, my feet moved before my mind decided. We sat on two worn wooden benches, the stall owner barely glancing at us as he poured steaming liquid into chipped clay cups. The warmth seeped into my hands as I held mine, though my insides remained cold. He took a slow sip, his gaze fixed on the steam curling upward. For a long time he said nothing, and the silence stretched unbearably. Finally he spoke, his voice low and heavy. "I was born in poverty," he began. "Just like you. Just like your parents. My mother sold roasted maize on the roadside. Her hands burned from the fire. My father hauled loads for men who didn't know his name. We counted coins like prayers, never knowing if they'd be enough for the next meal." I stared at him, disbelief warring with recognition. His words were my story, my life. But how could he, this man who claimed to build villages, speak it so perfectly? "I studied under lantern light," he continued, his eyes distant. "Borrowed books, torn pages, stolen minutes of learning between labor. People laughed when I said I'd rise. They said boys like me don't climb, they crawl. But I climbed anyway. Every coin I saved, every step I took, I carried my family with me." His fingers tightened around the cup, his knuckles whitening. "I worked, harder than anyone, harder than my body could bear. And one day, I rose. I became a man with power, a man with money, a man who could build what I once begged for. I leaned forward, my heart thundering. 'So, you built villages?' He nodded slowly. 'Yes. I knew what it meant to be homeless, to lose everything. So I used my wealth to give others what I once prayed for. Homes, schools, wells, safety. I built villages across this country, including yours.' The words struck me like a storm. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. Could it be true? Could this man, now wrapped in my thin blanket, his face worn by hardship, be the very hand that had given us a second chance after the flood? But before I could ask, his voice faltered. His eyes lowered, shadows darkening them. "But wealth," he whispered, "is not freedom. Wealth is chains dressed in gold. The higher I climbed, the lonelier I became. Friends turned into flatterers. Strangers turned into beggars. Every hand that reached for me wanted something. Not my heart, not my truth, just my money." He paused, his jaw trembling as though holding back something deeper. "I gave the world homes, but I lost my own. I gave the world water, but my soul thirsted. I gave smiles to strangers. But at night, I wept in silence." The weight of his confession pressed into me. My doubts began to waver, not because I fully believed, but because his pain felt too raw to be fiction. "What happened?" I whispered. "If you gave so much, why are you here now? Why on the streets?" His lips curved into a bitter smile. "Because the people I trusted most betrayed me. Partners I built with, friends I fed, turned against me. Greed devours even the kindest faces. They stripped my empire from me, piece by piece. And when I had nothing left but money, I walked away. I couldn't bear it anymore." I sat stunned, the cup in my hands forgotten. His words painted pictures too large to comprehend. Villages rising, empires falling, a man who had touched everything, yet lost himself in the process. And yet, here he was, sitting across from me like a broken stranger, wrapped in rags, sipping tea as if he belonged to no one. Finally, his voice cracked. He set the cup down, his hand trembling slightly. "Wealth," he said softly. "Isolation dressed as success. The more you have, the less you are seen. The lonelier you become." His eyes lifted to mine, glistening with unshed tears. "That is why your kindness tonight mattered. You gave me something no wealth, no empire, no title ever could. You saw me." I opened my mouth, but before I could respond, a sharp sound cut through the night. His pocket buzzed. He pulled out a sleek black phone, the kind I had only seen in the hands of the wealthy. My stomach clenched. He answered, his voice calm but clipped. On the other side, a voice boomed with authority. "Mr. Chairman, the board is waiting." My heart stopped. The teacup slipped from my fingers, crashing to the ground. I stared at him, my chest pounding, my mind in chaos. "Mr. Chairman?" My eyes darted between his ragged clothes and the glowing phone in his hand. Who was this man? This beggar who spoke of empires and villages? And what kind of truth had I just stumbled into? The title shattered everything. Mr. Chairman. Who was this man I thought was homeless? My heart thundered in my chest, my mind spinning between disbelief and fear. The man wrapped in rags, sipping tea like a stranger to the world, was suddenly cloaked in a title so powerful it made the air heavy. I had to know the truth, even if it broke me. The tea stall felt colder than the night outside. My hands trembled against the wooden bench, my eyes fixed on the glowing phone in his hand. Mr. Chairman. The words still echoed inside me, louder than the wind, louder than my own heartbeat. He ended the call with a calmness that unsettled me even more. Sliding the phone back into his pocket, he looked at me with those same steady eyes, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I shot to my feet, my voice cracking. Mr. Chairman? What does that even mean? Who are you really? Were you lying to me this whole time? The stall owner looked up briefly, startled by my outburst, then quickly looked away, pretending not to hear. The stranger, no, the chairman, did not flinch. His eyes followed me slowly, his face unreadable. I didn't lie, he said finally, his voice calm, measured. I only withheld what would blind you to everything else. I let out a bitter laugh, though my chest ached. Withheld? You let me believe you were a beggar. You let me pour out my life to you. And all the while you had this title, this power, this world I can't even imagine. Do you know how betrayed I feel right now? His eyes softened at my words. But he didn't move, didn't defend himself. Instead, he lowered his head slightly, as though carrying the weight of what I had just said. You have every right to feel that way, he admitted. But listen, if I had told you from the beginning, you would never have spoken to me the way you did. You would never have looked at me as you do now. You would have seen the title, the money, not the man. I sank back onto the bench, my anger wrestling with a strange sense of sorrow. His words felt true, but my heart resisted them. Why? I demanded, my voice quieter now but trembling with emotion. Why leave everything? Why walk these streets as if you have nothing, when the world calls you chairman? For the first time, his calm cracked. He leaned forward, his eyes burning with something raw. Because wealth blinded me, he said, his tone sharp with grief. It smothered me with noise, drowned me in false smiles. Every word I heard was calculated. Every handshake was a transaction. I forgot what it meant to be seen, as a man, not as a machine that prints money. His hands trembled as he spoke, his jaw tightening as if holding back years of suppressed anguish. I walked away. I left my empire in the hands of those who wanted it more than life itself. And I came here, among people who have nothing, so I could remember what it feels like to be human. His confession struck me like a blade. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to call him selfish, foolish. Another part wanted to weep for the loneliness etched in his words. I looked at him, torn. Do you have any idea how hard it is for me to process this? One moment you're wrapped in rags, trembling in the cold, and the next moment you're talking about empires, about walking away from everything people like me would die for. Do you know how impossible that sounds? His lips curved into a faint, sad smile. Yes, it sounds impossible. And yet, here I am. I shook my head, my chest tightening. Do you expect me to admire you, to pity you? No, he said firmly. I expect nothing from you, but I hoped you might understand. The silence between us grew heavier. His eyes searched mine, not with arrogance, but with a desperate longing to be believed. And that was what unsettled me most. He didn't look like a man hiding behind lies. He looked like a man stripped bare, offering me his truth like a wound. My anger cracked, just slightly. I whispered, "Part of me wants to hate you. Part of me wants to walk away and never look back. But another part sees the man you were before the title. His eyes glistened, and for the first time since we met, his composure faltered. His voice lowered, trembling slightly. That part of you, he said softly, is the only part I wanted to reach. My throat tightened. I didn't know if I wanted to scream or cry. I stared at him, my mind spiraling. He had listened to my struggles, seen my pain, asked questions no stranger would ask. Was it all genuine? Or just some test from a man who had the luxury to play with other people's truths? And then, he leaned closer. His eyes held mine, unblinking, filled with a weight that felt unbearable. You've given me, he said, his voice breaking into something raw. Something billions never could. His words struck me harder than the revelation of his title. I froze, my heart pounding, my breath shallow. What could I, a girl with nothing, possibly give a man who had everything? And why did his eyes tell me that whatever it was, it mattered more than all his wealth? Despite my doubts, I guided him through the village, watching carefully for the truth behind his mask. Was he truly the broken man who once carried an empire, or a deceiver wrapped in humility? With every step, I searched for cracks, but what I saw instead began to unsettle me more than any lie ever could. The morning sun draped the village in soft gold, its light catching the clay walls, the rusted tin roofs, the worn paths carved by countless footsteps. Children ran barefoot, laughter mixing with the bleating of goats. It was a scene I had seen all my life, ordinary and unremarkable, until I noticed how he walked among it, not as a stranger, not as a man above it, but as though he belonged. His bare feet brushed the dust lightly, his hands behind his back. People stared as we passed, whispers rippling like wind through dry grass. Some stepped forward to greet him, curious, cautious. Others pulled their children closer, suspicion etched on their faces. At the first stall we reached, a woman sat weeping softly, her goods unsold, her debts mounting. I had seen her there countless times, her eyes always heavy with defeat. He crouched before her, not with pity, but with the steady respect of one equal to another. "How much do you owe?" he asked gently. Her lips trembled. She hesitated, then whispered the sum. Without a word, he pulled out notes, clean, crisp, enough to wipe her slate clean. He handed them to her without bargaining, without conditions. The woman gasped, her hands shaking as tears streamed freely. She clutched his arm as if he were sent by heaven itself. The crowd murmured louder, a storm of shock and disbelief. "Why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. He only smiled faintly. "Because no one should drown alone." We moved on. At another stall, a carpenter hammered at a broken table, his tools rusted, his materials scarce. The man's shoulders sagged with exhaustion. The stranger, this so-called chairman, picked up one of the tools, studied it, and said softly, "These won't last much longer." "May I?" The carpenter looked startled, but nodded. He examined the wood, offered small suggestions, then quietly pressed money into the man's hands. "Buy new tools. Build without fear," he said simply. The carpenter stood frozen, staring at the money as though it burned in his hands. The whispers thickened. Everywhere we went, the same pattern unfolded. A widow struggling to feed her children. He paid for her meal. A young boy clutching torn shoes. He bought him new ones without question. An old man coughing through his sickness. He sent for medicine. He did not bargain. He did not boast. He gave and moved on, as though it cost him nothing but meant everything. I watched him carefully, searching for arrogance, for calculation, for the flicker of pride. But there was none. His eyes softened with every exchange. His voice grew gentler. His posture bent lower. And yet, the whispers around us grew sharper. Who is he really? No man gives without reason. Is he a savior, or a snake in disguise? Their doubt mirrored my own, Was his humility too perfect? Too carefully painted? Or had I been so used to disappointment that I no longer recognized sincerity when it stood before me? The children began to follow us. First one, then 5, then a crowd. They tugged at his hands, laughed at his attempts to speak their playful slang. He crouched down, letting them climb onto his knees, wiping dirt from their cheeks as if they were his own. I stood frozen, my chest aching. No mask I had ever seen looked like that. Still fear gnawed at me. Fear that this man, this chairman who once ruled an empire, would betray the hope he was planting, that his gifts were a chain, not freedom. As the day waned, we reached the old square where the market stood. The sun bled into the horizon, staining the sky in fiery red and orange. Vendors packed their goods, tired but watching him with unblinking eyes. He stopped suddenly, his gaze sweeping over the square, the stalls, the faces etched with hunger and hope. His expression shifted, softening into something I could not name. Longing, maybe, or remembrance. I stepped closer, my voice low. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from us? From me?" He turned slowly, his eyes locking onto mine. For a heartbeat, the noise around us dimmed. The whispers faded. The world stilled. His lips parted, his voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a storm pressed into a single breath. "You don't know it yet," he murmured, eyes burning into mine. "But this place already belongs to you." The words sliced through me, leaving me breathless. Does it already belong to me? How? Why? My chest tightened with a fear and wonder I couldn't name. What truth was he holding back now? And how would it change everything I thought I knew? His words stirred the nightmare I had carried for years, that one day men of power would destroy our home. My chest tightened. My palms grew cold. I had seen too many markets vanish, too many villages swallowed by glass towers and concrete. And now, standing before me, was a man who might hold the power to do the same. I had to know the truth, even if it broke me. The evening air was heavy, carrying the smoky scent of fires lit for supper. Children's laughter dimmed as mothers called them home. Goats bleated in the distance, and the village shifted into its quiet rhythm. But inside me, there was no calm, only a storm I could no longer keep silent. We stood at the edge of the square where we had spent the day. The stalls were closing, the whispers of villagers still chasing us like shadows. His last words echoed in my mind. "This place already belongs to you." I couldn't hold back anymore. I turned to him, my voice shaking but sharp. "Do you know what I fear most? That men like you, the rich, the powerful, will one day take everything we have. That this village will be bulldozed, its colors erased, its laughter silenced. That glass buildings will rise where our homes now stand, and they'll call it progress, while we lose everything." My words spilled like fire, fast and uncontrollable. I've seen it happen. I've heard stories of villages wiped out, of families broken because they couldn't fight corporations. What makes you different? Why should I believe you won't do the same? For the first time since I met him, his gaze faltered. His eyes lowered to the ground, his shoulders sinking under a weight I couldn't see. His silence was louder than denial, and it stabbed me like a blade. My throat tightened. I whispered, almost trembling, "You are one of them, aren't you?" Slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes held no excuses, no easy lies, only truth that cut deeper than any denial could. "Yes," he said softly. "I belong to that world." The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. My chest burned, my fists clenched. Anger rose, hot and bitter. "So it's true. You stood here, you listened to me, you let me believe you understood us, and all the while, you're one of them. The very kind of man I fear will bury this village alive." He didn't flinch, didn't argue. His face was calm, but his voice carried quiet desperation. "I won't deny it. My world has destroyed villages like this, My world has stolen voices like yours. But listen." "I don't want to listen," I snapped, my voice breaking. Villagers nearby glanced at us, their eyes widening as whispers spread again. I didn't care. My heart was raw, bleeding with betrayal. "You came here wrapped in rags," I spat. "But you can walk away to towers, to wealth, to everything people like me can't even dream of. Do you know what that feels like? To bare your soul to someone who can destroy you with a signature?" His jaw tightened, his hands curling slightly at his sides. But still he didn't lash back. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice until it trembled in the air between us. "I know what it feels like to lose everything," he said. "That's why I'm here. Not to take, but to remember, to see with my own eyes what power forgets, to find someone who can speak truth to me without fear." His words pierced me, but my anger clung stubbornly. Words are easy. Promises are easier. But in the end, you'll always belong to them. You'll always go back to the world that feeds on people like us. His eyes darkened, but not with anger, with sorrow. Yes, I belong to that world, but that doesn't mean I cannot fight it. For a moment, silence hung heavy. The night deepened, stars beginning to scatter above us. Villagers still whispered nearby, their voices sharp with suspicion. I felt their fear, their doubt, their mistrust, and it mirrored my own. I folded my arms, my voice low but trembling. "Why me? Why this place? Why now?" He looked at me then, his gaze burning with something raw. "Because you are unafraid to hate me. Because you are unafraid to tell me the truth, even when it cuts. Everyone else gives me polished lies, rehearsed smiles. But you gave me honesty, even when it was anger. That's why I trust you, and that's why I came here." My breath caught. His words tangled around me, pulling at a place inside me I didn't want to open. I wanted to turn away, to shut him out. But part of me couldn't. Still, the fear wouldn't leave. The thought haunted me. What if this was all a performance? What if he was preparing to strike, to crush us, once our guard fell? The village lights flickered in the distance, lanterns glowing like fragile stars against the dark. For the first time, the place I had called home felt fragile, like it could vanish in an instant. And then, his voice cut through my storm, soft but unshaken. Finally, he looked at me and said, "What if I told you I came here to protect it, not ruin it?" The words froze me where I stood. Protect it? Could such a man, one of them, truly mean that? Or was it the sweetest lie of all? My heart raced, torn between fury and fragile hope, knowing whichever truth followed would change everything. Could a billionaire really mean to save the poor instead of exploiting them? His words struck me like thunder, and for a moment, I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or run. Men with power usually came to take, but here he stood, claiming he had come to give. I couldn't tell if it was madness, truth, or the most dangerous lie I had ever heard. The night deepened around us, lanterns glowing in the square, their flickering light dancing on the walls of clay huts. Villagers were dispersing slowly, though many eyes still lingered on us, watching, whispering. The stranger, no, the chairman, stood quietly at my side, his hands clasped loosely behind his back, his expression calm, yet weighed down. His last words still hung between us like a storm cloud. "What if I told you I came here to protect it, not ruin it?" I swallowed hard, forcing myself to speak. "You say that now, but I've heard promises before. I've seen people fooled. Words are cheap." He nodded, as though he had expected my doubt. "Yes, words are cheap, which is why I don't ask you to believe my words. I ask you to see my heart." I scoffed, folding my arms tightly. "Hearts don't build villages. Hearts don't pay debts." "True," he admitted softly. "But hearts decide whether those things are built for greed or for love." His voice carried no arrogance, No polished persuasion, only something raw, almost fragile. And that unsettled me more than any speech ever could. We walked slowly through the narrow path that wound behind the square, the night alive with the chirping of crickets. He moved carefully, his eyes drifting over the huts, the worn fences, the patched roofs. It was as though he was memorizing every detail. Finally, he spoke again. "I have built many villages like this," he said quietly. "Some grew. Some flourished. Others were swallowed by the same forces you fear. I thought money alone could preserve them. I was wrong. Money without. Soul is just another chain." His words hit me harder than I expected. I glanced at him, searching his face for deception, but all I saw was a man speaking from scars, not from pride. "Then why here?" I asked. "Why now? Why me?" He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. His eyes locked onto mine with a weight that made my chest tighten. "Because when I spoke to you, I didn't see fear. I didn't see calculation. I saw truth. You spoke to me as if I were just a man, not a chairman, not a billionaire. Do you know how rare that is? In my world, no one dares speak truth to power. But you did, and I realized I could trust you." The air caught in my throat. My fists clenched, torn between suspicion and something I couldn't name. "You trust me," I whispered. "I'm just a villager. I have nothing." He shook his head, his voice lowering. "You have everything I lost. Courage, honesty, humanity. That's why I need you." The rawness in his tone shook me. This man who commanded empires, who carried a title that made men tremble, was now standing before me, asking for my trust. Not demanding, not buying, asking. For the first time, my anger wavered. I remembered the way he paid debts without bargaining, the way he bent to speak to children, the way his eyes softened when he heard my story. None of it had felt fake, none of it had felt rehearsed. And yet, fear lingered like a shadow. Could I really believe him? Could a man like him truly stand against the very world that had made him powerful? We stopped near the well at the heart of the village. The night air was cool, the moon silver above us. I leaned against the stone edge, my heart pounding. "You don't understand," I said finally. "My whole life, I've been taught that men like you destroy, that wealth always takes more than it gives, that people like us are nothing but soil for your towers. How can I throw away everything I know and believe you?" He stepped closer, his eyes steady, his voice trembling just slightly. "Because I don't ask you to throw away what you know. I ask you to let me prove that I am different." The silence that followed felt endless. His words pressed against me, heavy with both danger and possibility. I looked at him long and hard. His posture was humble, his expression open. For once, he didn't look like a man wrapped in secrets. He looked like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if I would push him or take his hand. And it terrified me. Because deep inside, a fragile part of me wanted to believe him. I turned my face away, blinking hard against the emotions welling in my chest. My mother's words echoed in me. Kindness is never wasted, even if the world laughs at it. Was this kindness or a trap? When I finally looked back, his gaze had not moved. His eyes still held mine, patient, steady, unflinching. And then, with a voice that was both soft and unshakable, he asked me the question that froze my soul. "Will you let me prove my intentions?" My breath hitched. My heart was hammered. If I said yes, I risked everything. If I said no, I might lose the one chance to save my village. And in that moment, I realized the choice wasn't his. It was mine. The next morning, the village gathered for an announcement none of us expected. The square was overflowing, the air charged with tension, as though every heartbeat waited for a verdict that could change our lives forever. And when he stepped forward, dust clinging to his shoes but resolve shining in his eyes, we knew something powerful was about to unfold. By sunrise, the village was alive in a way I had never seen before. Vendors who usually opened late had rushed to their stalls, their baskets filled and ready. Mothers carried their children on their hips. Fathers leaned on their hoes and canes, all drawn to the heart of the square. Even the elders, who rarely left their homes, sat on stools at the front, their wrinkled hands folded tightly, eyes sharp with both hope and suspicion. I stood in the middle of the crowd, my heart beating like a drum. The whispers swirled everywhere. What will he say? Will he take the land? Or will he give us something? When he finally appeared, the noise fell like a curtain. He wore the same plain clothes, the same humility in his walk, but something about his posture was different. He carried himself with purpose, as though every step weighed with responsibility. He climbed the stone steps of the square, turned and looked at us, not as a king over subjects, but as a man standing before family. "I came to you first as a stranger," he began, his voice steady but warm. "I walked your paths. I saw your struggles. I heard your stories. And last night I asked for one thing: your trust." The crowd shifted, murmurs breaking out. Trust was not easily given here. Too many promises had turned to dust before. He raised a hand, silencing us. "I do not stand here with empty words. I stand here with proof." My chest tightened. Around me, villagers leaned forward, their breaths caught. He continued, his voice stronger now. "Starting today, I have created a fund for this village. It will provide for 3 things: schools, hospitals, and loans. Schools, so your children will never be chained by ignorance. Hospitals, so no mother will bury her child because medicine was too far. Loans, without interest, without punishment, so no man or woman here will ever drown in debt again." The words struck us like thunder. For a heartbeat, silence smothered the square. Then, as though a dam had broken, the cheers erupted. Women lifted their hands to the sky, shouting prayers. Children danced, clapping their hands. Men shouted until their voices cracked. The square shook with joy, the sound echoing off the hills. But not all faces carried joy. I saw them. Men with folded arms, eyes narrowed, mouths pressed into thin lines. Elders exchanging doubtful glances, their silence louder than the cheers. Suspicion lingered, a shadow refusing to leave. He saw it too. He didn't shy away from it. Instead, he pressed on. "This land," he said, his voice now cutting through the noise like steel, "will never be touched by corporations. Not while I live. I will fight them with everything I have. This soil, these homes, this market, it belongs to you. Forever." This time, the cheer was deafening. It roared like a wave, sweeping through the crowd. Tears blurred my vision as I turned and saw my parents standing near the front. My father, the man who carried crates on his bent back for years, who wore exhaustion like a second skin, now wept openly, his hands trembling. My mother, who had shouted prices through blistered lips, covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. For the first time in years, they were crying, not from pain, but from hope. The sight broke me. My throat closed, my chest burned. I wanted to believe, desperately. He stood silently now, letting the crowd erupt, not raising his chin in pride, not drinking in their gratitude. Instead, he bowed his head slightly, as though humbled by the very trust he was trying to earn. Still the whispers crept in, sharp as knives. Can even a billionaire be trusted? Promises are cheap. What if this is just another mask? I heard them, felt them claw at my heart. Hope was alive, yes, but fear was not dead. And in that moment I realized our future hung not only on his words, but on whether we could believe them. As the cheers roared around me, the whispers still cut deep. Can even a billionaire be trusted? They asked. I looked at him, my heart torn between the joy on my parents' faces and the fear in the villagers' eyes. And I knew The real battle was not against corporations. It was against mistrust, festering like a wound that could destroy us from within. The village was no longer one heart. Hope and suspicion collided in every corner. For every cheer, there was a whisper of doubt. For every prayer of gratitude, there was a mutter of fear. The air itself felt split in two, and I knew one wrong step could shatter everything he had promised. By evening, the square still echoed with the morning's announcement. Some villagers walked with lightness in their steps, speaking of schools, hospitals, and debts erased. Their eyes glowed with something rare: hope. But others lingered in shadows, whispering sharp words. No man gives without taking. What if he wants the land? What if it's a trap? Their voices coiled through the village like smoke, choking the joy. I felt torn between the two sides. My parents still wiped tears of hope from their eyes, clinging to his words like salvation. Yet in the corners, the elders spoke in low, guarded tones, their mistrust weighing heavier than faith. And so, I went to him. I found him at the old tea stall, sitting quietly, a cup untouched before him. The lantern light flickered across his face, deepening the lines of weariness etched there. He didn't look like a man basking in victory. He looked like a man waiting for judgment. I sat across from him, my voice breaking the silence. Why? Why risk so much for us? Why stand against the world you belong to? For a long time he didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the steam curling from the cup, as if the question had pulled him far away. When he finally looked at me, his gaze carried a weight that made my chest ache. Because I lost everything that mattered chasing profit, he said softly. The words sank into me like stones into water. He took a slow breath, his voice trembling at the edges. Years ago, I was consumed by the chase. More contracts, more towers, more land. I told myself it was for my family, that if I built enough, earned enough, they would never suffer as I did. But I was blind. I traded time for numbers, love for buildings, laughter for meetings. His hand shook slightly as he set the cup aside. One night while I was away signing deals, a fire broke out in my home. My wife and son. His voice cracked, breaking into silence. His throat worked as he fought for words that seemed too heavy to carry. They didn't survive. I froze, my breath catching. The market noise outside faded. The world seemed to still, leaving only his grief hanging in the air between us. He pressed his palms together, his eyes wet. I built towers, but I lost my world, and every deal after that tasted like ash. That's why I left it all. That's why I came here. Because I couldn't bear to live one more day chasing profit while people like you, people like them, were crushed beneath it. His confession tore through me. This wasn't a rehearsed speech. His pain was raw, carved into every syllable. For the first time, I didn't see a chairman or a billionaire. I saw a man bleeding behind his wealth. And yet, fear still lingered. I leaned forward, whispering, "What if you mean well, but fail? What if your promises collapse, and we're left broken?" His eyes met mine, steady despite the grief. "Then I will fail, standing with you, not above you." My chest tightened. His words felt too heavy to ignore, too raw to dismiss. But still, the village was divided, and their doubt could undo everything. Outside, I heard the whispers rise again, the villagers splitting into clusters, some hopeful, some fearful. The air pulsed with tension, like a rope pulled to breaking point. He must have heard it too, because his voice lowered, almost a plea. Then he leaned closer, his eyes burning through the flicker of lantern light. "Don't let mistrust destroy what we can build together," he said. The words cut deep, settling heavy in my chest. Could trust really bind us stronger than fear? Or was mistrust the shadow that would tear us apart before anything could? Begin. I stood at a crossroad. Walk away in fear, or give him the chance to prove himself. Every warning in my heart told me to run, but every memory of his kindness pulled me back. The decision felt like more than mine. It felt like the future of my entire village rested on my choice. And in that moment, I knew I could no longer stay silent. That night, sleep abandoned me. I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of our hut, my thoughts a storm. His voice echoed again and again. Don't let mistrust destroy what we can build together. My father's quiet snores came from the corner, my mother's soft breathing steady beside me. These were the two people I had fought for all my life. Their cracked hands, their bent backs, their whispered prayers. Could I really turn away from a man who offered them hope? But what if it was a lie? What if he was only another wolf in borrowed clothing? I closed my eyes, and scenes flashed before me. The way he bent low to wipe a child's dusty cheek. The way he bought fruit from Mama Kemi without bargaining, paying double. The way his eyes glistened when he confessed his loss. None of it had felt fake. By dawn, I had my answer. When I found him near the well, the morning light catching the lines of exhaustion on his face, my voice shook, but my words were clear. I will believe you. For a moment, silence wrapped us. Then, slowly, his lips curved. Not in triumph, not in pride, but in quiet relief. Then we begin today, he said softly. Together we walked to the square, where villagers still murmured in clusters. Their eyes followed us, cautious, questioning. Some faces lit with hope at my presence beside him, others darkened with doubt. But I held my chin high. We must plan, he said, his voice firm but gentle. Not grand speeches, not dreams painted in the air. Real plans, with your people, for your people. And so we began. At Mama Kemi's stall, he asked her gently, if you had support, what would you do first? Her tired eyes widened. I'd hire help, maybe even send my daughter to school. At Baba Musa's cobbler stand, he leaned low. If we build something lasting, what part would you play? The old man smiled faintly. I'd train the young. Too many waste their days idle. They could earn, like I do. One by one, we moved through the village. The spice seller dreamed of a shelter for her siblings. The widow whispered of expanding her stall to feed her children. Even the quietest voices dared to speak, their words shaky at first, but alive. I watched their faces transform. Hope, fragile, trembling, began to glow in eyes dulled by struggle. For the first time, the village was not just surviving, it was imagining. We gathered beneath the shade of the great tree in the square, chalk and charcoal scratching against wooden boards as plans took shape. Small steps, repairing roofs, organizing savings, building a communal fund. Bigger dreams, a school, a small clinic, clean water. He listened to every word, never interrupting, never dismissing. His presence wasn't commanding, it was grounding. And slowly, something shifted in me. The mistrust I had carried like a shield began to crack. I saw not a billionaire, not a chairman, but a man willing to kneel in the dust to hear us. A man whose sincerity felt unshakable. By evening, the air was alive with something rare, unity. Villagers who had glared at him in suspicion now nodded thoughtfully. Children laughed as they carried water for the plans we had scribbled. Even the elders, though still cautious, softened slightly. My heart swelled. For the first time in years, I believed tomorrow could be brighter than today. As the sun dipped and lanterns flickered to life, I sat with him near the tea stall. The village buzzed softly around us, voices filled with cautious excitement. I studied him, still searching for cracks, still half afraid I would find one. But all I saw was exhaustion and gratitude. Finally I asked, why me? Why not anyone else? He turned his gaze to me, his eyes steady, his voice low. Because you never lied to me. Not with words, not with anger, not even with silence. You saw me as human, when the rest of the world only saw my title. That is why I trust you. That is why I chose you. Something inside me broke. The wall of doubt I had clung to for so long crumbled, leaving only raw, unguarded faith. For the first time, I let myself believe fully. But just as peace began to settle in, he leaned closer, his eyes glinting with something heavier than before. His voice dropped to a whisper that sent a chill through me. "There's still one last truth I must tell you," he said. My breath stopped cold. If everything he had revealed so far had shaken me, what storm could this final truth bring? I braced myself, unsure if his last truth would heal or break me. Every secret he had revealed so far had shaken the ground beneath my feet. But this one, the way his voice trembled, the weight in his eyes, felt final. It felt like the truth that would change everything, not just for me, but for the village I called home. The night was quiet, yet heavy with expectation. Lanterns flickered in the square, their soft glow casting long shadows on the cracked earth. The villagers had gone to their homes, but I stayed behind with him. The silence between us was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the silence of two people standing on the edge of something bigger than themselves. Finally he spoke. His voice was low, careful, as though each word had been weighed. "There is one last truth you deserve to know," he said. My chest tightened. "Tell me." He leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "I could buy this village tomorrow. Every field, every hut, every road, every stone. With a single signature, I could own it all." The words struck me like a slap. My heart lurched, rage boiling up before I could stop it. "So this is what it was about. After everything you said, after every promise, you admit you can take it all from us?" But his eyes didn't harden. They softened. He shook his head firmly. "No, that is not my truth. That is my temptation. My truth is this. I refuse to own it. Instead, I will do what no one before me has done. I will buy it only to give it back. Legally, permanently, forever. Every stall, every hut, every patch of soil will belong not to me, but to the people, to you, to them, to the generations still to come." The world tilted. I stared at him, my anger breaking into confusion, into disbelief. "You would give it to us?" "Yes," he said simply. "It will be yours. The deeds, the papers, the law itself will say so. No outsider, no corporation, not even I will have the right to take it from you again. This village will belong only to its people, for as long as it lives." I couldn't speak. My throat burned, my eyes stung. For years we had lived with the fear of losing everything, of watching bulldozers arrive one morning and erase our lives in the name of progress. And now, here he was, offering us permanence, offering us freedom. "Why?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "Why would you do this?" For the first time, his composure broke. His lips trembled. His eyes glistened. "Because you remind me of my mother," he said softly. The words pierced me. He swallowed hard, his voice heavy with grief. "I grew up in poverty, like you. One night when I was a boy, the cold was so cruel I thought it would kill me. I had nothing. But my mother, she took her only blanket, thin as it was, and wrapped it around me. She shivered all night, but she smiled, because I was warm. That moment stayed with me, buried deep, even when I chased wealth and forgot where I came from. And when I met you, when you gave me your only blanket without hesitation, it was her all over again. You reminded me of who I was, of what she taught me, that love is worth more than gold, that kindness outlives power." Tears blurred my sight. My chest ached. I had thought my blanket was nothing, just a scrap of warmth on a cruel night. But to him, it had been everything. "You gave me what billions never could," he said. "You gave me back my mother. And now I want to give you, and this village, a gift that can never be taken away." The days that followed were unlike anything I had ever seen. Lawyers arrived, their briefcases filled with documents and seals. Elders gathered in the square, their hands trembling as they pressed their names into history. For the first time, the deeds of the land were written not in the name of governments or corporations, but in the names of the people. The village erupted. Women sang in the streets, ululating until their voices cracked. Men clapped each other on the back, laughter mixing with tears. Children danced barefoot in the dust, painting their faces with chalk, their joy uncontainable. I watched my parents clutch the papers that bore their names, their eyes wide with disbelief. My father, who had carried the weight of poverty for decades, wept openly. My mother fell to her knees in prayer, her voice breaking with gratitude. The air itself seemed different, lighter, freer. For once, our home was not fragile. For once, we did not live in fear of eviction, of erasure. This was ours, truly ours. And through it all, he stood quietly at the edge of the square. No grand speeches, no demand for thanks, just a faint, tired smile, his eyes wet but shining. He didn't look like a billionaire. He didn't look like a chairman. He looked like a son who had finally kept his mother's lesson alive. I walked to him, my heart overflowing. "Do you realize what you've done?" I asked, my voice shaking. "This village will never forget your name." He shook his head softly. "No, don't remember me. Remember her. Remember the lesson, that power means nothing without love, and wealth means nothing without people. Let that be what survives." And that night, as I stood in the square and watched my people dance beneath lanterns and stars, his final words echoed in me like a prayer. I had given him a blanket, never knowing he would give us a future that could never be taken away. It was no longer just survival. It was freedom. It was his gift, and now, forever, ours. If this story touched your heart, don't just leave silently. Let your voice be heard in the comments. Hit the like button if you believe kindness can truly change the world, and share this video with someone who needs hope today. And make sure to subscribe, because every story we tell here is a journey of emotions, faith, and second chances. You won't want to miss the next one.